Edgy fantasy stories are a Russian roulette of quality. It's hard to find a series that strikes the right balance of some stylish and edgy humor along with some actual substance in the story to back it up. Many of these series fail in their attempts to be dark and funny by falling down an endless rabbit hole of meaningless dialogue and edge purely for the sake of the genre. And even when a series ends up hitting it out of the park with their comedy or characters, it's a matter of complete luck on whether or not the story benefits from this humor at all, or is even interesting to begin with, as sometimes the world building and characters are forsaken for a cheap joke or line. But that's not the case for End and Save. End and Save is the perfect mix of amazingly written dialogue coming from well thought out and complex characters, combined with a world so whimsical and interesting that it puts plenty of pure fantasy stories to shame. So without any delay, let's get into it. So End and Save is a webtoon or webcomic, and I'm not gonna lie, I couldn't really find much information on the series, such as its background or any info about the author, but online the author is listed as somebody under the name of Shiryoung, so I guess we'll go with that for now. The story of End and Save revolves around two characters, who go under the names of End and Save. No comment. End is a villain, and his role isn't the most clear at the start, but people around him refer to him as a villain, and End seems to prefer to call himself that as well. End seems to be a kind young man with black hair and starry eyes. However, it's clear to us very soon that the initial kindness we see from him is all a facade, another layer to serve him as a villain. Save, on the other hand, is his assistant, seeming to be a child, or at least a teenager, but it's kind of hard to tell since the series is drawn in like a semi-chibi style. But bottom line, these two are unequivocally evil. They are killers and thieves, and they do anything in their power to reach their end goal, no matter what that may be. But anyways, the story is about End and Save's adventures, misadventures, conflicts, and conquests through the world of Fairy Tale Land. And that brings us to our first talking point, Fairy Tale Land itself, aka the setting for our story. Fairy Tale Land is a classic fantasy land with humans and fantastical creatures living in the closest thing to harmony you can possibly imagine, until you look a little bit deeper. The first blemish that appears on the otherwise pristine white paradise that is Fairy Tale Land comes from the existence of monsters. In the story of End and Save, there are many types of living beings that inhabit the world. There are the humans and other creatures that are indistinguishable from humans, and then there are the animal-human hybrids, such as frogs who can talk, or a cat that can talk, or... yeah, you get the point. And finally, outside of those two categories are the monsters. Think things like zombies, werewolves, vampires, creatures like that who you'd expect to exist in a fantasy story like this. These monsters are heavily discriminated against even though they think and act just like a human should. The only difference between them and the humans is their appearance and their occasional impulses and tendencies, such as a vampire's thirst for blood. Because of this discrimination, these monsters are downtrodden, used as mercenaries when useful and as target practice when not. The treatment of these beings is the first hint that something isn't quite right in Utopia. The second blemish, and the one more integral to the plot, is introduced to us first through one of our two main characters, Save. You see, in Fairy Tale Land there's a problem. The strange combination of magical beings such as fairies and the like, combined with the world of science and technology, has given humanity the desire to play God, causing a spike in human experimentation. Humans, upon seeing the extraordinary traits of those around them, seek to bring those same superhuman feats to humanity. Their reasoning for this varies greatly. Some desire a super soldier, others want to attain magic, and more still do it to save their friends or family. But the methodology always remains the same. Their experiments are always more effective on children. Yep, you heard that right. In this pastel-colored wonderland, there's a rampant problem with child experimentation. And those observant among you may have connected the dots already, but for the rest of you, let me lay it out. Save, the sidekick to the murderous villain End, was a victim of one of those human experiments. Save, who is a cold-blooded killer, someone that would follow End's crazy schemes to the end of the earth, was experimented on by the so-called scientists of his world. And suddenly, the story isn't as black and white as we once thought. The seemingly irredeemable actions of the main character suddenly make a whole lot more sense, and you start to understand the cold, detached way that Save looks at the world. Quick disclaimer, by the way, I'm going to start talking a little bit about spoilers here since it's in service of explaining the characters, but even if you get a bit spoiled, I would still recommend checking the series out itself, because this story is one you truly need to experience on your own. So, Save, despite his seemingly youthful looks, is actually a middle-aged man who was forcibly kept at the same age for decades as part of the experiment he was forced into. Save was forced into an inhuman experiment by a bunch of researchers at a young age in the attempt to create super soldiers. Every single day he was forced to fight for his life, most of the time at the expense of his fellow experiments. Quite a while passed, and eventually Save was the sole survivor of these tests, and that's when he was finally deemed ready to put through the final stage. Save was administered a large amount of drugs and was set to be preserved in a tank until the procedure was over. And when he finally managed to wake up many years later, he had fully transformed into something inhuman. Even after Save is able to escape from the facility in which he was created, his life doesn't get much easier. He is soon found by an inspiring young scientist who starts to covet Save's everlasting youth. Through another round of testing, this time over the course of a couple decades, the scientists discovered that Save's body is resistant to poisons and other illnesses, and that he's able to use his body to create antidotes for those same poisons. Though this was an important result in their test on Save, it was not their end goal, for what the scientists truly strived for was immortality. The head doctor who worked with Save through the years was someone dead set on attaining everlasting life, and he rightly believed that Save was the key to that seemingly impossible puzzle. And through the decades of research, they discovered that they were correct and that it was possible to attain everlasting youth through the child. However, that was only if Save willingly made them a potion, and seeing as the scientists were the ones that kept Save captive for so long, that wasn't soon to be the case. Through all of this, Save remained unmoved. He grew detached from the idea of humanity, frequently escaping and going on murder sprees, if only to be caught and detained again soon after. Save's life was becoming more and more pointless and lonely the more time he spent in the clutches of his captors, and his only passion became the different forms of murder he would come to commit. In the few times that he got free, of course. But all of that changed when End arrived. End showed up to assist the scientist in experimenting on Save, but one day, for seemingly no reason, End releases Save's restraints. This was not the first time this had happened, as plenty of other researchers took pity on Save for his childlike appearance, but all of those researchers were killed by Save shortly after his release. But despite knowing this, End still chose to remove Save's restraints, with the sole request being that Save kills End only after he steals the lives of everyone else in the building. End is an interesting character. He's somebody defined by the true excess he always found in life. He was brought up in a rich family where he always had whatever he wanted whenever he wanted. He did well in school and was well liked by his peers, and as he grew older, he inherited his family's massive wealth, ensuring that there would be no need for him to work a single day for the rest of his life. But despite all of this excess, End was still bored. He tried out anything that caught his interest, anything that he thought would fill the void in his heart, but nothing could. He always grew tired of it after a while. End grew old like this, doing anything that brought him joy, just trying to live his life to the fullest, until one day he is invited by one of his old friends to see something that may interest him. This friend of his is the same doctor that was experimenting on Save. Through talking with his old friend, End learns about Save and the rampages that he goes on whenever he's released. And End, still looking for something that will interest him, decides to see for himself what Save is capable of, and that's what leads him to free Save with the request of killing everybody else. At first, when Save is released, he tries to kill End, the same as he did for every other person that tried to save him. But after seeing End's reaction to the deaths of his fellow researchers, Save gets curious and saves End from dying. Together, they go through the building, killing anyone and everyone they come across, and after seeing End and his lust for blood, Save finally decides to truly trust End. Save brews End a potion to return him to his youth, and just like that, the two officially become villains, who enjoy nothing but the thrill of murder. End is truly evil. He feels nothing at the death of those close to him and feels even less when it comes to the death of random others. The first thing that makes him feel truly satisfied was the first time he killed a man, and that feeling is what endears him to Save. Save considers End as his only friend and his one true companion. The only person that thinks even somewhat similar to how Save does, and because of that, Save wants to keep End around forever. However, that's where the duo's differences become more apparent. Save was extremely lonely. His immortality made all other lives seem trivial in comparison, and his special lust for blood made him unable to relate to anyone else around him enough to want to spend time with them. That is, until he meets End. End is the first person he relates to, the first person that Save considers family, so naturally Save wants to keep End around for as long as humanly possible. However, that's where the pair's differences in beliefs start to show. End doesn't wish to live forever. It took a lot of effort for Save to even convince him to return to his younger body. End, as somebody who is easily bored and has no attachment to things, is bored of life and only wants to keep living for as long as he finds something interesting. It's the embodiment of the age-old question of, if you could live forever, would you? It seems like an illogical question. Why would I ever want to worry about death or illness? Isn't it reasonable to want to be immortal? But then the questions start rolling in. What would I do for an eternity? Who would I spend it with? And would all those extra years seem like a blessing to me or a curse by the end of it? End embodies those sentiments. He doesn't care enough about Save to want to spend an eternity with him, and he doesn't believe that he will be able to continuously keep himself entertained for any long period of time. So he continues to decline Save's request to keep him immortal. But some of you may be thinking, but Roro, what do you mean he can't keep himself entertained for eternity? Didn't you just say he found his passion in the deaths of others? Well, if only that was the case. Even to End, killing soon became old. He got tired of the same old villainous role that he was playing for so long, just doing whatever he wanted in the moment. He grows tired of his normalcy. He thirsts for something more once again, and that's when he finally gets it. Every villain needs a hero, just like how every shadow only exists with an accompanying light, and that knight in shining armor eventually reveals themselves. Les is a fairy, a creature who is capable of creating amazing feats of magic, and he is somebody with an incredible sense of justice. He helps those in need and refuses to turn a blind eye to the problems of others. He's basically your typical white knight hero for the fantasy stories that many people are used to, and he's the antithesis of End's overt villainy. One day when End and Save and their two underlings are out at a party, End has his first encounter with Les. Les and a team of other fantasy creatures have been assigned the task of capturing End and Save, and Les, willing to help others no matter what the cost, accepts in a heartbeat. When the two meet at the party, End is fascinated by Les's naive sense of justice. He finds joy in tormenting the fairy and seems to have found something finally interesting to do once again. The two are complete opposites, one who has a need to do good and the other who can't find joy in his life unless he commits acts of evil. The differences between the story and other ones come mainly in the form of these characters that I've been talking about. And while I've mainly been focusing on End and Save, there are plenty of other characters that are just as interesting as them. But I don't have much time left in this video, so let me just wrap up my point about End. One of the most interesting things in relation to End's character is his status as a villain. In most other stories, a villain will have a long drawn-out backstory that explains tragically why they turned to the life of crime that they did. This usually is for the purpose of drawing some sense of sympathy towards the villain and making them more understandable. However, this trend is so overtly denied in this story. Even when End was explaining his backstory to someone else, they questioned what had made End turn to a life of evil, and End denies there being any such reason in the first place. While I do think in most stories it's good to have a sympathetic villain, it helps make the story feel less black and white, End and Save is a breath of fresh air with the way its protagonist, who just so happens to be a villain, is set up. But I'm sure you're wondering, if there isn't any cruel backstory like Save's that explains why End is a villain, why is he such an interesting one? Well, that comes down entirely to his writing and character design. While End and Save are evil people who would kill in the blink of an eye, they're written in a way that conceals this. End is funny and charming and almost always acts as the impulsive one that pushes the plot forward, and Save is the straight man, somebody who is extremely capable and the one who serves as the foil to End's over-the-top energy. Their writing is so good, in fact, that when End and Save truly do act their role as the villain, it comes across as a lot more menacing and genuine because they have more sides to them than just pure evil. To add to that, the art fits this story perfectly. Just like the writing, it is full of pastel colors and pretty scenes, and all of the characters are done in a cutesy style, which makes the story really engaging to read. However, it also doesn't shy away from showing gore or violence in its full, accentuating the dark undertone to this otherwise fun-filled story. Bottom line, End and Save is one of the most unique stories I've ever read, with amazing characters, a fun world, and great writing to back it up. Thank you guys so much for watching, and thanks so much for 50 subscribers. I'm really dating the script by saying this in case I get any more subscribers by then, but I'm really thankful to all of you guys for sticking around, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider it. It means so much to me. Thank you guys for watching, and hope you have a great day. Bye!